Good afternoon, good evening. I want to begin our Women Get on Board virtual event today, hosted by our National Strategic Partner BMO, by acknowledging the land in which I live is in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Hautesinys. The Upper Canada Treaties cover this territory, and it is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon WAPAM agreement and is directly adjacent to Halaman Treaty territory. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to enjoy the natural surroundings of this territory. I encourage all of us to become actively involved in understanding why land acknowledgements are important and understanding Indigenous histories and contemporary Indigenous issues in Canada. Welcome. I'm Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get on Board. Women Get on Board is a member-based company with over 850 members across Canada, and our mission is to connect, promote, and empower women to corporate boards. Our goal is quite simply to get one more woman on a board, one board at a time. We are pleased to be celebrating International Women's Day 2023 today to recognize the BMO Celebrating Women on Board honorees and to hear from women leaders from BMO on how they embrace equity. As women leaders, we have a civic duty to elevate the next generation of women leaders by advocating for their economic empowerment and financial freedom so they can make independent decisions. We can achieve this empowerment through education, mentorship, and allyship. I am pleased to introduce to you our moderator for our talk today on Embrace Equity. Jenny Chen is a senior advisor of diversity, equity, and inclusion for BMO Wealth Management. She grew up in Ottawa and began her career with BMO in 2008 as a customer service representative, holding various roles, including financial and planner. She is a two-time nominee for the Business Women of Year Award and catapulted herself to being recognized as a leader for women in wealth in Canada. Jenny is known for her leadership in overcoming gender bias in the workplace in her new Girls Club, starting a new table of women who want to help one another succeed. She has held many leadership positions with BMO, along with serving on various boards for organizations that champion for the inclusion, connection, development, and support of business women in BMO and in the community. So thank you, Jenny. I am turning it over to you. It's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deborah, for the super warm welcome, and thanks for having me join in the conversation today. I took a look at the attendee list, and I'm happy to see that a lot of the women in the New Girls Club actually are attending today. So super excited. Women Get on Board has been a strategic partner of BMO since 2018. And we are so proud of women to support Women Get on Board because increasing women's presence in boardrooms is an area where we would all like to see growth. A study shows that the percentage of women on board of directors on Fortune 500 boards increased from 18% in 2009 to 28% in 2021, which is huge. And at BMO alone, women make up 50% of our board of directors, which we believe reflects the changing population demographics of the markets in which our bank operates, the talent available with the required expertise, and the bank's evolving customer and employee base. And so if we think about it, 50% of Canada's total population is women, right? We're no longer just a segment anymore. And having more women on boards means greater diversity of skills, experiences, opinions, and strategies. And it means better governance. And better governance inevitably means better accountability, which leads to better results. I will note that although we've seen impressive strides over the last few years for women in general, and despite changing demographics, women of color are still disproportionately underrepresented and only make up about 4.6% of board seats in the Fortune 500, even though we're about 11.5% of Canada's total population and 18% of the US population. So there's definitely more work to do. In our 4-year history with Women Get On Board, we have co-hosted a number of events to inspire, educate, and empower women to join corporate boards. We are super proud to co-host an event around International Women's Day, where we get to hold a conversation around global International Women's Day themes. And this year, we recognize and celebrate women who have been selected as BMO Celebrating Women on Boards honorees. Our 6 honorees are women who shine in and outside of the boardroom and will be announced later in the program by Sheri Griffiths, our executive sponsor for the BMO for Women program. I'm super honored to lead this important discussion with our panel on this year's International Women's Day theme, which is Embrace Equity. First, I'd like to ground us in what equity really means. But I can see that we're introducing our panelists. So why don't I introduce our 2 panelists first? First, we have Laura Gibson, who is our Vice President of Commercial Banking, Mid-Market, Nova Scotia, and PEI at BMO Commercial Bank. Laura has had a variety of roles in her 17-year tenure at BMO, including work at the retail bank, roles in treasury and payments, and sales leadership. She has a keen interest in working with women clients and has been involved in an advisory board for women business owners for the past 5 years. In her spare time, she's a mom to 3 teenagers and enjoys cheering them on and traveling with the family. Then we have Kamilah Reid-Burrell. She's our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Canada of BMO Financial Group. Kamilah is a social impact specialist who is committed to data-driven change for those who have been excluded from equitable access to resources and opportunities. In her various professional roles, Kamilah has been involved in establishing employment equity plans and developing diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy on topics like anti-racism and inclusive recruitment and hiring practices. Since joining BMO in 2022, she's working with leaders from across the bank to develop strategies, partnerships, and programs that support BMO's goals for zero barriers to inclusion. And so before we get into the panel discussion, I'd really like to ground us in what equity really means, because we keep hearing this concept used interchangeably with equality, and it's not. So sure, they're both a key part of diversity and inclusion initiatives that seek to make workplaces more diverse and more productive, innovative, and competitive. Equity is such an important concept, and it's actually the most critical part of the DEI equation, especially as it relates to gender equity, because it refers to fairness and justice, and it's not the same thing as equality. For example, by April 2020, when the whole world was shutting down around us, 60% of the Canadian workforce was sent to work from home, right? Both men and women. Now, if we only measured equality, then by virtue of men and women now both working from home, it should have stopped there, because equality means providing the same to all. But if it means that our rights and responsibility and opportunities aren't the same, irrespective of our background, like gender, race, and ethnicity, physical and non-visible disability, social status, and much more, then if we think about the beginning of the pandemic, despite the fact that women outnumber men in the paid workforce, despite there being a seismic shift in the traditional division of household responsibilities and gender norms, we still saw inequities in the workplace because women still did more of the domestic work and childcare, almost twice as much as their male partners, which led to higher rates of burnout for women, more women putting their career moves on hold, and a higher number of women actually leaving the workforce. But if equality is the end goal, then equity is the means in how we're going to get there. right? Because equity actually means that we recognize that we don't all start from the same place, and letting people break free from the standards of the past and understanding who people are as individuals rather than making assumptions based on their background to help confront challenges for them in a relevant way. And so our panelists today include two super accomplished women who can each provide a different lens on how they embrace equity. So let's jump right into our panel discussion. Kamilah, you are on first. What does embrace equity mean to you in your role in DEI at BMO?
First of all, thank you, Women Get On Board, and Jenny for that wonderful introduction. Jenny, I particularly appreciate that differentiation between equality and equity that you just made. Jenny and I, for everyone on the call, were chatting earlier today, and I shared a little anecdote with her that I'd like to share with you that I thought, less gravitas than the pandemic, but equally kind of illustrative. I was talking to a colleague, a senior executive here at the bank, and he and I were chatting, great banter, and he was kind of fiddling with his phone as we talked. And I was like, wow, like you don't have a case on your phone. Like, how brave of you. Like, I can't afford to drop mine. Like and he was like, yeah, I just stick it in my pockets. And he demonstrated like how many pockets he had available to stick his phone into. And this was not like a mini phone, right? And I said, wow, it must be nice to have pockets. We were dressed similarly. Like I had on a suit blazer, I had on pants. But none of the pockets, either they were not real pockets, I'm sure all of the women on the call are familiar with this, or they were pockets that are not designed to hold anything substantive. And he, mind blown, right? And that's just a little silly illustration of equity, right? Like his clothes is designed to hold his belongings without the need for additional items, and women's clothes typically is not. And so that is it's inequity in the design of clothing. So, to kind of moving on to Jenny's question, equity for me is the precursor of equality, right? With equitable access to spaces, opportunity, resources, we all have an equal chance of participating in society and achieving our full potential. Equity and embracing equity requires first a deep understanding of the barriers that people experience. This can only be developed by building community with a wide variety of people and doing the research. Data tells us some things, right? You can count many things, but it's imperative that the people who have been historically excluded are centered in the discussion of the issues that are impacting them, their communities, their children, their livelihoods, all of that, while also inviting them to help solve for the problem. A variety of communities use the mantra, nothing about us without us. And that speaks to equitable access to a seat at the table where these issues are being, challenged. Embracing equity also involves being comfortable with difference. The challenges and the solutions that are experienced by one community will not necessarily be experienced in the same way by another. Some won't require attention at all in an area that is crucial to another. So the challenge for all of us is to avoid extending a one-size-fits-all approach to our efforts to ensure that everyone is seen, heard, and made able to participate fully in all areas of life.
Thanks, Kamilah. First of all, I love that comment about pockets. I will gladly give up a chance of what I think is supposed to be a smoother silhouette as defined by women's fashion from like 100 years ago to take some pockets on my pants and dresses. Thank you very much. I also love what you said about not using a one size fits all solution to addressing the issues of inequity. I think a great deal really depends on understanding systemic barriers that impact marginalized groups holistically And then obviously some degree of, standard policy and approach to tackle the issues is important. But then equity really focuses on who we are as individuals, because sometimes two individuals with exactly the same identity characteristics can have very different needs and very different views on what's fair. So I think that's a very important note on that. So thanks, Kamilah. Laura, what does embrace equity mean to you in your role as a market leader in commercial banking?
Hi, Jenny. Thanks very much for the lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here with all of you to celebrate International Women's Day. And so when I think, and we was reflecting as we prepared for the panel today, when I think about it as a market leader, what does equity mean to me, and what does it mean to our teams? Is I think it also is rooted in clients that we support. And so when I look at our teams, it should be a reflection of our clients, and making sure that we have equal representation across both age, gender, and so that our clients can really see themselves represented in our teams when they're coming to BMO. So I think it's important when I look at our teams across the commercial bank is to really mentor and to be able to support women in the organization, not just at senior levels, but that really does start at our junior positions as well, and ensuring that we're supporting those who are coming into the bank, and ensuring that they have and that they're comfortable and can raise concerns. And so it's important for me as a leader and a market leader to ensure that I have that my team feels that they can put their hand up when they don't agree, and setting the tone for conversations and dialogue, because recognizing that my experiences are not the same as anyone else on my team, and we all come at our lives and our jobs from different places. And so it's setting a tone myself. And for me, embracing equity isn't just, it's an action, and it's a daily action that we need to be mindful of, and to show up either in mentorship, allyship, and ensuring that we're allowing our teams a safe space to really speak up and have diverse opinions, and to encourage that. And so it's both from a team perspective and from a client perspective, because we need to ensure that all of our clients feel well supported as well, and can see themselves within the organization.
I love that. I love the note about the tone from the top is really, really important, because this is really about leadership accountability also, and role modeling. And thank you for bringing up the point about mentorship, Laura. I think it's really important. I think that having a mentor, a champion, a sponsor is really crucial in providing equitable opportunities, especially for women, because studies show that women are actually over mentored and under sponsored. And we know that, most people find their mentors informally through their own networks based on similarities, right? Beliefs, values, and experiences. It's usually like a peer or someone one level higher with more knowledge and experience than you, that you've already established a relationship with, right? So that they can provide guidance and support. But sponsors are really hard to find. 1 out of 5 men have sponsors, and only 1 of 8 women do. So Laura, follow-up question. How do you find a champion or sponsor?
And I think, Jenny, I would answer that in 2 different ways. I think you need to, number one, be open to being a sponsor and being a mentor yourself. So I think that's part of the equation. Is I think in leadership roles, I think women, we have an accountability to, support other women. I count myself very lucky. I look at, some of our senior female leaders in Atlantic, and they are, we're some of each other's biggest cheerleaders. And so I think it's important to find that group of people, and for women to see other women supporting each other. We've competed for jobs along the way, but I think it's really important to have that group who you can really rely on, and to sponsor each other and to lift each other up. So I think that's so important. But then I think you also need to, formally either ask other women in the organization or positions. I think if Sheri comes to mind, Sheri Griffiths, who will be introduced to later as our executive sponsor, has, she has a reputation of being a fabulous mentor and sponsor for women across the organization. And so we need more Sheris to do that. And so I think it's being, bold and brave to ask for those, if you feel that that is something you would benefit from, to reach out as well, to find those mentors and sponsors as well.
As someone who has
yeah, sorry, Jenny. I just wanted to jump on that bandwagon and also talk about the flip side of that coin, which are people who have influence or have access to power, have a seat at that table. Look around, right? Like who have you sponsored historically? Who have you mentored historically? And how can you do that in a more equitable way, right? So it is one thing to ask for, but if they're not available, or if they're simply like, we just need you. Sheri, lovely as she is, I'm sure, cannot sponsor every woman at BMO who is in need of that sort of support. A sponsor is a person who's going to speak your name in rooms that you don't have access to. So there is an investment in time and energy to get to know that person, to trust that when you put someone forward, they're going to deliver, and they're going to, in effect, make you look good, right? Because they're going to be able to live up to the standard that has been set. So I would invite those who do have access to think about how they can share that, how they can more equitably share that access. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would add to that, one of the when I reflect on my own, career journey, some of my best sponsors, shall we say, have been male colleagues who are also championing, our careers and great mentors and sponsors along the way. So I think it's also too important to acknowledge that piece as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point, Laura. And thanks, Kamilah, for that. And I think the reality is, like, there's just a lot of organizations, there's still not enough women in those most senior roles, right? So we do look to our men in our networks, professional networks, personal networks, to sponsor and champion women in their organizations, for sure. So thanks for that point. Kamilah, over the past decade, more companies have tried to demonstrate a commitment to equity in recruiting, engaging, developing, and promoting employees. But as we know, it's really hard to properly establish more equity in an organization, right? We're at risk of having practices teeter on tokenistic, when the majority are still earnestly searching for ethical and the right way to achieve organizational equity. What are some of the successful strategies used for embracing equity, and how can we see this done in practice?
Well, I mean, I think at the outset is a need to build trust, right? One of the impacts of inequity is kind of positioning the dominant culture as the default. So to combat that, you've got to create safe spaces for members of diverse communities to share their experiences, provide, support and guidance, celebrate their communities, just a real psychological safety that this organization is willing to invest the time and resources to allow for those sorts of conversations. And we see this happening in employee resource groups, more specifically, right? It also provides the added opportunity to develop allyship, right? Those groups don't necessarily have to be closed communities, and folks who don't necessarily hold those identities, but want to provide support and to participate, want to lend their influence and their platforms. This is a great way to do that, and to really develop that sense of belonging and inclusion that will help move the needle towards equity. Another way that you can kind of operationalize equity work is to provide opportunities for folks from underrepresented communities to engage with leaders within the organization and to participate in the development of solutions. So this can be through listening sessions, it can be through focus groups, and it circles back to that, nothing about us without us concept, right? It is just allowing folks to participate in identifying the barriers that they experience, as well as the development of the solutions. Organizations need to be really intentional and employ customized tactics or programs that are informed by the impacted communities. So these two-way interactions, they can, be around pieces of education. They can be rooted in talent development programs, sponsorship and mentorship programs. It even speaks to the way that we develop products and services, right? Like it doesn't all have to live inside of the house. We are a part of our communities, even as organizations, and it needs to extend externally as well. I could kind of go on and on, but I will add that transparency and critical reflection, I think, are key to developing equitable practices. We, want to encourage organizations to share your goals, to hold yourselves accountable, to really to be flexible, try a solution, but measure the impact. If you're not measuring, the solution, if you're not reflecting on, with the involvement of that community, how did that land? Is it solving for the problem that we thought it would be solving for? You really have no way of determining whether or not you're actually on the right path. And of course, being open to pivoting. You might just need to make a minor tweak on a program to make it the right fit for the community you're trying to support. You may need to scrap that and start over with something else entirely. Of course, you want to give yourself enough time to actually see if it's working, because nothing really, there's no magic pill. None of these things happen overnight, but making that a part of the process of that reflection, that assessment, and that willingness to tweak as you go is, I think, critical to advancing equity.
Thanks, Kamilah. I think you touched on something important. Not only, do we need to set goals, right? Like clear goals for equity and inclusion and diversity, both because one, we can't improve what we don't measure, but also like not just quantitatively, but also the qualitative
Absolutely.
experiences of individuals to help us learn and to move towards that progress, right? That we're looking to achieve. So thanks so much for that. Laura, to make progress towards equity, everyone in an organization plays a critical part and really needs to be involved. But we're often seeing that people are feeling excluded from the conversation altogether, right? This zero-sum bias seems to be deterring groups from engaging in the conversation, let alone take action, because it fuels the belief that one group needs to sacrifice resources or stature or promotions, job opportunities, so that the others can earn a place at the table. And that in itself pervades workplace equity altogether, right? And that whole narrative. So as a leader at BMO, how do you set the tone with your team on this topic and other leaders as well?
So thanks, Jenny, and then I would agree that it really is, it's something you need to be mindful of, especially when you're looking at hiring, and we need to change that narrative of, one person or a group that's sacrificing for another, because it starts with being bold when we get, when we all do our recruitment and we get our, your initial pool of candidates. If you're not satisfied, we need to be bold and, and push back and have another conversation and make sure, that we have a diverse pool. Getting two individuals, is not enough. And so I think it starts with being mindful. And when you look at, there's been many studies over the years. I know Hewlett-Packard did one. There's been several where when you see a job posting, men often see one or two characteristics and check, and they'll apply for the job. Whereas women can see that list of different qualifications. And if they don't have 90% or 9 to 10 of them, they won't apply. So it's making sure that the job descriptions that we're posting are really reflective of what we want in a candidate. Because I think one of the unintended consequences of having, 25 different potential characteristics that we would really like to see in a candidate, you start to not have as diverse a pool because people self-select out, right? So I think it's important, from a recruiting standpoint, that we even have great conversations with our recruiter of, here's the top 3 things that I'm looking for. Here's the things that are nice to have. Here's the things that are must-haves. And so to have a broader pool, and if they come back with, where you're not satisfied and not happy, to try to understand why and how, and to really push the narrative, because that's one of the challenging pieces, is that sometimes you don't have the diverse group that you would hope. And it really, sometimes we have to take a step back and be a critical thinker, as you and Kamilah were both saying, is there something wrong with how we're posting, where we're posting those job postings, right? So it's being really strategic, and we have to, be critical of ourselves sometimes and say, why am I not? I know there's a ton of super qualified candidates. Why are they not applying for these types of roles?
Right. No,
And
I love that.
If I could add to that one, I really like that, it ties to that critical reflection piece, because I think there is a sort of history of leaning on the job description as it currently exists, because, that just is like, we all look for shortcuts in the work. And if this is what a sales rep has been posted as for the last 10 years, then this is kind of, we tweak it based on location and those things. But a funny exercise that I saw somebody recommend was like, interview people who actually do the job. Right? Mm-hmm. Are the skills listed on the paper actually the things that the people who do the job are doing? And if you are focusing on, right, if this is a top performer, this is a person who's doing a great job, and 10 of the 20 things you've listed are not things that they are, considered to be or are currently doing, then why do we hold on to these things? So I think that's a great opportunity for that, like, that equity piece. Like, let's not necessarily lean on what we have historically used. Let's be not only more concise and more targeted about what we think are critical skills, but let's also compare it to the people who are currently doing the role, so that the people coming in, because I don't know about you all, but like, I've definitely come into roles where I'm just like, but this isn't, you required all of this as a newcomer to the organization, but those who have been here, 5-10 years don't necessarily hold the same qualifications. So right. you create a whole different problem by working with job descriptions that aren't an accurate reflection of the job.
Yeah, for sure. I love that point. I think it's really important to fill the top of our funnels with equitable recruitment processes in place. And I think that, we have an opportunity, as I reflect on some of the great recruitment practices that we've implemented here at BMO. It's really about potential versus proof, and saying, well, even this person might not be the best candidate today, but they've demonstrated all of the necessary skills for them to be successful in this role and grow, right? And so really, really understanding the difference between, the long game and the short game when it comes to leaders who are building their teams. Kamilah, we all know that the business case for DEI in an organization, and we know that there is a strong correlation between diverse teams and improved business performance. And it is on the forefront of a lot of organizational leaders' minds in the past few years. But with the rapidly changing economic, social, fiscal landscape, how can DEI remain a priority for organizations that have so many other big issues to tackle and deal with?
Right. So I think about DEI as both an issue, where there's a lack of diversity, inequitable practices, lack of inclusion, but also a solution. By ensuring that you're aware of engaging with all facets of your customer and your employee populations, you're strengthening your base, your foundation to weather kind of stormier economic times, etc. We also know that customers, investors, potential employees are increasingly aware of and interested in the impact that organizations are having in the broader community. So organizations that ignore this, right? Like we've all seen the marketing campaigns that completely missed the mark because there was clearly nobody along the way to say that actually is deeply offensive to this community or that. There are financial costs to not considering this in the work. And it's not as simple. I think some organizations think, it's as simple as a review But really, like, for example, I think of, I think it was Gucci or somebody who had the sweater that was like effectively blackface, right? Either you had people of color on the team who maybe did or did not flag, but the question is, what power did they have to stop this, right? So that's the difference between diversity and inclusion. Just having folks on the team who should have been able to identify this is different from having people on the team who not only identified it or listened to the fact that it was identified, but had the power to make a different choice. So these are like, there are endless business cases to show that homogenous teams engage in kind of homogenous thinking. And that isn't to say that, that there aren't lived experiences that are not related to one's racialized identity, etc. But diverse teams across all sorts of characteristics tend to ask a lot more questions of themselves and of others, just kind of because their experience is not the default. And so therefore they ask more, they inquire more, they test more, and therefore are less likely to make those sorts of mistakes, and are also more likely to connect with audiences that otherwise would not have been approached or engaged with.
Thanks, Kamilah. I'd like to ask a follow-up to that, if you're okay with it. Where we're not seeing progress across industry organizations everywhere, what do we need to pay more attention to going forward?
Oh, that one is tough. I guess, I think digging into the intersection of identities a little bit more. I mean, it can sometimes feel like boiling the ocean, right? Like there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of challenges to be addressed. I think I love the African proverb, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, basically. It is avoid doing it all superficially and focus on the biggest needs, and then drill down and spread out as you get good at solving for those big problems. I think it can be a bit frightening to take action. I think there is a fear of making a mistake often. And I think if you have developed a culture with psychological safety where people feel included, that includes being able to make mistakes, right? You validate as best you can, you work with the information you have available to you right now, and you act and you assess. And you keep kind of rinse and repeat, right? You're definitely going to make mistakes. We are all human. We all make mistakes. If you develop a culture where you model how to make a mistake, how to own your mistake, take accountability for it, and correct, then you're definitely on the right path. So those kind of would be the keys that I would see. I think we're kind of sometimes a little bit stuck in the listen and learn phase, and progress requires action. And so we've got to kind of shift to the action, including making mistakes.
And I think that we also, if we notice mistakes or errors, right, that even for us to, I think we have to remember to always maintain a level of compassion. I think over time, especially in this social virtual world, we've kind of lost that, just because something doesn't resonate with you or doesn't land the way that someone intends it to, doesn't mean that there's malicious intent. Right.
Yes.
But giving the opportunity for someone to course correct and grow, like myself, I've asked for the grace to be able to provide me feedback if ever I do something, because that's the only way I'll grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So. Yeah. The impact, of course, of issues, need to be considered. But I was in conversation with somebody last week, and I think our culture has shifted towards the person is the mistake, not the person made a mistake, right? So it is just like individuals will make mistakes. Let's focus on the mistake and how to kind of learn or unlearn or adjust, but it doesn't necessarily paint the whole person's character because they made a mistake.
Yeah. And so Laura, with that, like even as a market leader, right? If we think about where you perhaps have seen either resistance to creating equitable opportunities, or someone might not actually intend to say or do something, but it doesn't really align with their values or with BMO's values, for example, or how do you respond to that?
And I think that's an important point, Jenny, is that it's not always intentional, right? Like it's not, sometimes, having grace and people do make mistakes. And I remember early on, we were celebrating, we were measuring our progress in terms of DEI, and, we had so many at the senior leader level. And I think we had to call it out and say, yes, all of your women though are in operational roles and all of the men are in sales roles. And it wasn't until you speak up and say, oh, wait a second, I didn't notice, because we were measuring just sheer numbers, right? So I think it's important to kind of to point it out when you do see that there are some inequities. And I think we've probably all likely had the experience of being sometimes the only female in the room and asked to take the notes because you just happen to be there. And so I think it's, it's not intentional, but just habit. And so I think as leaders, we have to, as you said, meet them with grace and realize that it's not always intentional, but call it out. And so do I think early on in my career, have I made missteps where, you go home and you reflect and you're like, wow, I should have probably said something in that situation or raised that because it's not sitting well with me. And so I think as a leader, you also have to model going back and saying, you know what, I want to talk about this and I want to, address this because it hasn't set well, and let's have a conversation about it. And so it's, speaking up when you do see those and realizing that, we're all human and we're going to make some mistakes and, wish we'd address things differently. But for me, it's important to just model that for the team as well. And to say, you know what, nobody's going to get it right 100% of the time. I'm not. And so I challenge you and I give you all, my blessing. Please let me know if I do make a misstep, and just give that type of environment. So I think it's just super important.
Thanks, Laura. And I am mindful of time. I realize we're almost at the end of our panel discussion, and I know that this is such an important topic that we could go on forever. But I always like to end with one final note from our speakers for the audience. What is one thing that you want the audience to leave with today on the topic of embrace equity? Kamilah, let's start with you.
Well, first, thanks, Jenny and Laura. This has been a great conversation. We've had a few now leading up to this panel, so I hope that doesn't end today. But one thing that I hope everyone takes from this conversation is that equity requires intent with attention to impact, both individually and collectively. So many of us, as I said, overwhelm is a real thing in this space. We think about the concepts of equity, inclusion, accessibility, anti-racism, all of these things is sitting in the realm of policymakers, right? Whether it be government or it be your organization, you're looking to your leaders to solve these problems. But in fact, each and every one of us holds the power and responsibility to act inside of our spheres of influence. So I would invite everyone joining today to think about the spaces they occupy, both professionally and personally, to think about the identities that are dominant in those spaces, think about the identities that are missing, and think about what you can do about it. Sometimes it's as simple as the questions you ask, as Laura was mentioning, just kind of looking at these demographics here, and they're not, balancing in quite the way you think they are. But sometimes they're about the choices you make too, right? Like if this is, thinking about the service providers in and around your home, are you thinking about whether or not you're actually, extending beyond the network of what you know and what's comfortable, and inviting others to engage in your space with you. So whether it's through the questions you ask or the choices that you make, I just hope everybody walks away recognizing that they, as an individual today and every day, are a necessary and critical part of the solution.
Thanks, Kamilah. And Laura?
Perfect. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Kamilah. This has been fun, and I agree. And I think it's my final thoughts are along the same lines. Is that for me, equity is action. You know, I think you've hit it earlier, Kamilah, when you said like gone are the days where you can just passively, act, let things happen or make suggestions. I think we underestimate all of our own power to make change. It is a big conversation, and there's a lot of moving parts, but each individually we can impact a significant number of women in our lives. And so when you look at it at that granular level, and that if it's the old story that you can impact 5 or 6 women across your career and your life, that's a huge impact, and they all continue to pay it forward as well. So the equity piece really is about action, and that would be what I would hope to leave everyone with, is to be mindful, and to have grace, but continue to push forward. And it really is an action that we need to keep top of mind. Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Kamilah and Laura, for sharing your insights and experiences with us on embracing equity. I think we all learned so much from your experience and expertise today. My takeaways from today are equity doesn't happen by chance, right, Kamilah? Intent and focus. And as you noted, while it is broad practice, it is really about education and learning and involving diverse communities throughout our planning and implementation stages to allow their voices to impact the solutions to the inequity at hand. And Laura, you mentioned it, it's really about holding ourselves and others accountable, recognizing that this is everyone on a journey together, right? And being vulnerable and asking for feedback, offering transparency to build that trust, that we're working towards greater equity and inclusion together. I encourage everyone tuning in today to continue the conversation by visiting the Women Get On Board website. There you'll find important information and other great events like this one, and resources available to help support and empower women to corporate boards. In the coming week, you'll also be receiving a follow-up post-event email, which will include a link to the official International Women's Day website that gives a really great overview of the differences between equality and equity. And there's also going to be a feedback survey, so please take the time to share your thoughts on today, as it's going to help shape future events. You'll also see a link to an interactive e-learning initiative created by BMO together with First Nations University of Canada called Nishatumwin, which we've made available to the public for the next 3 years. Nishatumwin introduces participants to the fundamentals of Indigenous history, the diversity of Indigenous peoples, treaties, and nation-to-nation agreements, residential schools, the Indian Act, and the ongoing struggle for economic and social justice. As education and awareness is the first step to reconciliation, this initiative is part of BMO's engagement with and commitment to our Indigenous communities. And I would like everyone on this call to join BMO on our journey to deepen our understanding to advancing reconciliation and eliminating barriers to inclusion for all. And with that, I'd like to thank Women Get On Board and BMO for Women for having me here today. I'm always super inspired by these discussions, and I look forward to continuing to empower women on boards together. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to Sheri Griffiths. As the head of Ontario BMO Commercial Bank and executive sponsor for the BMO for Women program, Sheri has been a champion for women throughout her career. As noted when all of us gave our We Love Sheri moment earlier on this call, her efforts in creating a culture of equality and empowering those around her contributed to Sheri being named one of Canada's most powerful women by Women's Executive Network in 2020. Please join me in welcoming Sheri to announce the 2023 honorees of the BMO Celebrating Women on Boards program. Sheri, we're so pleased you're able to be with us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. I do want to give a big thank you to all of those that participated in that panel, both Laura and Kamilah. I thought your comments and thought-provoking questions, commentary with each other, for me just continues to keep me inspired on the work that we do And I do take very seriously personally, because I do think along my journey, I've had a lot of folks that have helped me in my conversations, and, you know, certainly talk about me at the table when I needed that. And so I'm certainly proud to have those conversations on behalf of others wherever I can and whenever I can. And so I appreciate that conversation today. I am so excited. As much as I've loved every part of today, I personally think I have the best job today. And if I could do this every day, this would be a highlight for me. Having the honor of being able to celebrate the Women on Board's honorees today is personally something I've been looking forward to, and a great way to kick off International Women's Day as far as I'm concerned. But before I introduce these amazing women, I do want to just take a moment to share a little bit about our background around BMO Celebrating Women. We do have a long history of supporting women, and this particular program, I think we started probably about 12 years ago, if I remember correctly. And initially, when we used to do these celebrations, we did them in person. And of course, over the last several years, because in person was not available, we actually moved the BMO Celebrating Women program to things more virtually. So it gave us an opportunity to do things like the BMO Celebrating Women grant that we have been doing and we will be announcing in the coming weeks, and also to partner like great organizations like Women Get on Board and be able to do these types of events where we're celebrating women on boards. And for me, I think it speaks really well to just the values in the work that we do as an organization to honor so many women. I think we've honored, over 250, if I have to roughly estimate a bit, of the type of women that we've honored through this program. And so very committed to continue to do that and happy to be a part of it. So today, I get to celebrate the honorees. And so nominees are evaluated based on their breadth and depth of governance leadership. Effectively, these women excel both in and out of the boardroom, participating in their communities at a volunteer level and in the corporate world at the executive level. It really is inspiring to see the impact that these women have had across the country. So I'm excited to announce these honorees today. We're going to be recognizing 3 women from Western Canada, 2 from Central Canada, and 1 from Eastern Canada. I'm going to invite each of them to say a few words after I announce them, and then we'll move on to the next honoree as well. So starting in Western Canada, there was a 3-way tie for the honorees this year. And our first honoree is Jacqueline Keena. Jacqueline is a managing director of the Enterprise Machine Intelligence and Learning Initiative, an agriculture AI accelerator working to increase the adoption and integration of intelligent technologies across the agri-food value chain. Jacqueline is a professional agrologist and holds degrees in agribusiness and public policy. Her passions span a variety of subjects, including agriculture, financial empowerment, and good governance. In keeping with these areas of interest, Jacqueline volunteers her time as a board director for Assiniboine Credit Union and chair of the Women's Enterprise Center of Manitoba, a not-for-profit that administers small business loans for women entrepreneurs. Hear, hear. She brings a unique perspective to her board work as a young Métis woman working in agriculture and technology. Jacqueline, congratulations, and I'll turn it over to you to say a few words.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks very much, Sheri, and thanks to BMO for this really incredible recognition. It truly is an honor for me to be recognized today, along with this wonderful group of honorees that I'm excited for you to meet. I also wanted to thank Bonnie Shartwacki, one of last year's honorees, for nominating me. I've had the opportunity to get to know Bonnie over the last few years as we served together on the Women's Enterprise Center of Manitoba board, and this year as chair and vice chair. We've heard today about the importance of making space for people with diverse experiences and backgrounds to participate at board tables. And I'm grateful to my colleagues at the Women's Enterprise Center and Assiniboine Credit Union for making that space and fostering an environment where I can succeed and contribute at those board tables. We know that when women participate on boards and in senior leadership, businesses and organizations do and perform better. Collectively, we have more work to do in this space, and we've heard some key actions to move our cause forward this afternoon. So thank you for the opportunity and for doing this important work to increase women's representation on boards across Canada. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Appreciate it. Our second honoree today is Cybele Negris. Cybele is a tech CEO, serial entrepreneur, experienced corporate director, a sought-after speaker, mentor, columnist, and a Hall of Fame inductee into Canada's top 100 most powerful women. In 2000, she co-founded webnames.ca, Canada's original .ca registrar and one of the country's leading internet solutions companies. Cybele serves as an ICD accredited director on a diverse portfolio of corporate boards. These boards include webnames.ca, AGF Management, the Royal Canadian Mint, the BCAA, and Blue Shores Financial. She also works very closely with the Chair, BC Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation. Cybele is Vice Chair of the Small Business Roundtable of BC. She also serves as Vice Chair of Science World and champion of the annual Girls and STEM event, as well as on the board of TELUS Vancouver and Coastal Community Board. She chairs the Departmental Audit Committee for Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada and serves on a number of other advisory boards and councils. I honestly don't know, Cybele, how you have any time to do anything based on that introduction. I'm so impressed. Congratulations, Cybele. I will turn it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Sheri, and also to our wonderful panel of speakers today. So to BMO and to Women Get on Board, this acknowledgement is truly an honor, and I'm so grateful for it. I started on my board journey almost 2 decades ago, and first starting on not-for-profit boards to a board of governors on a university, government boards, crowns, and then eventually to private corporate boards, and more recently a board of a publicly traded company. And I'm really thankful to all the directors that I've worked with. And along the way, I've learned from so many of them. Together, we made tough decisions. We asked the challenging questions, and we together added to the diversity of thought and help to better the organizations that we served on. So Women Get on Board has been part of that journey the last several years. And I really want to thank Deborah because she's been a big part of that for me. And I really appreciate your advice, Deborah, and the community that Deborah has created. And that community also includes Anar Papadia, who I'm pretty sure was the one who nominated me for this recognition. So thank you, Anar. And huge congratulations to my fellow honorees from across the country. I'm really proud to be amongst such a distinguished group, all working together to elevate governance in Canada. Thank you so much for this recognition.
Thanks, Cybele, and congratulations again. Very excited.
Thanks, Sheri.
Our final honoree from Western Canada is Beth Bell. Beth is an ICD corporate director, a former IBM Canada vice president. She has spent the last 15 years of her career leading Canadian consulting portfolios. In her last role, she led 1/3 of the IBM Canada business. She serves on the Manitoba Hydroelectric Board as vice chair and chairs the HR, Environment, Safety, Health, and Stakeholder Committee. She's a director for the Cerebra Health and chair, as well as chair of the Corporate Development Committee. She's also a director for Red River Mutual Insurance. She serves as chair of the International Women's Forum Winnipeg chapter, a global group committed to advancing women's leadership and equality. And Beth was a diversity champion for IBM for her entire career and was honored to be appointed to the IBM Global Women's Council, a group of 20 global executives who are responsible for the advancement of women's strategy for the IBM Corporation. She proudly serves as a mentor in the Women Get on Board mentoring program. Congratulations, Beth. I'll turn it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Sheri. I'm truly honored and humbled to be here today. And I want to issue my own personal thank you to BMO and Women Get on Board for their sponsorship of this program. I have to say I've been blessed my entire board and professional career with some terrific mentors, both men and women. And I really feel that the best repayment for their help is to pay it forward. So in turn, I've offered my help and guidance where it was appropriate to many women and men, just like people like Deborah Rosati, who when I was in a board pursuit and needed help with a few questions, got on the phone instantly with me to help me out. However, it's important to help women get onto corporate boards. And so an additional role I think I play is to leverage my network of amazing women to help identify women to fill vacant board seats. And so mentoring and advocacy in this space is really critical, and that to achieve gender parity on boards. So to close, I really want to congratulate my fellow award winners. I really hope that we can meet in person soon. Thanks, Sheri.
Thanks so much, Beth. And I agree. This was a good reason for all of us to meet in person. We'll have to find a moment. All right, so moving on to Central Canada, our first honoree is Carol Devenny. Carol has over 40 years of experience as a professional accountant, as well as many years volunteering on not-for-profit boards, where she often chaired audit committees. Carol is currently chair of the Ottawa Community Foundation Board and serves on the boards of the National Arts Centre Foundation and State Street Trust Company Canada, where she chairs the irrespective finance and audit committees. She previously served on the boards of International Women's Forum Canada, Ashbury College, Alzheimer's Society of Ottawa Carleton, Ottawa Centre for Research and Innovation, and the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario Foundation. She obtained her ICDD in 2017 and completed the Women's Director Development Program at Kellogg Northwestern in 2019. Congratulations, Carol. I'll pass it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you. And let me start with a big thank you to BMO and Women Get On Board for this honor and for recognizing and supporting women on boards. Congratulations to my fellow honorees. Supporting, promoting, and mentoring women is just part of my DNA, and which is why I'm delighted to have joining me today virtually. So it's nice we can do that. The interim CEO, Grace Zinn from Ottawa Community Foundation, and two finance colleagues from Equality Fund, Ogi Maduge and Irene Sandoval. As a CPA, I joined my first NPO board 30 years ago, the Alzheimer's Society of Ottawa Carleton, as their treasurer. And what an experience that was. I learned so many life lessons, like how to present financial statements and budgets to non-financial board members, how to speak up and be heard at meetings, particularly where I thought we were taking unnecessary risks. I'm a big planner, which means as I was approaching mandatory retirement from a 38-year career with PwC, I was very focused, in fact, some would say obsessed, with my next phase, which I assume would be joining boards. So I obtained my ICD.D, attend an amazing women director leadership program at Kellogg Northwestern, and of course participated in everything that Women Get On Board offered, including my independent director resume writing workshop. So a big thank you to Deborah Rosati and Elaine Roper for their great advice. As my PwC retirement date of June 2020 approached, my plan was coming together nicely. I agreed to take on chair of the Ottawa Community Foundation. A former colleague reached out to my new LinkedIn, again, thanks to Deborah, LinkedIn profile stating seeking board positions, and recommended me to the State Street Trust Company Canada board. And on March 11, 2020, I made a trip to Toronto and I got to meet the CEO and in-house counsel. I thought it was kind of odd. They were wiping down elevator buttons. And then 2 days later, March 13th, we were all sent home from our respective offices, and I actually never returned to the PwC offices again. I retired via Zoom. So much for my networking plans. Pursuing board opportunities during pandemic was impossible. And suddenly those boards I did serve on, like Ottawa Community Foundation, were under extreme pressure to provide COVID response and pivot in all kinds of ways. Chairing was really challenging. And I learned so much. The pandemic really blew up my plans, but actually in a really good way. I learned through the process that any board I take on, any opportunity, I wanted it to be about helping women. And then I found something landed in my lap called Equality Fund, an organization sponsored by the federal government. It's all about gender lens investment and supporting women initiatives. So I took on the CFO role there, and I am now responsible for reporting to a virtually global all-female board. And I'm learning every day about something called feminist governance. And it's really interesting. So I guess my message here is, board involvement is a journey, whether we're board members or reporting to boards. And I just see over and over how we as women play such a critical role. Thank you once again to BMO and Women Get On Board for your thought leadership.
Thanks, Carol. I really appreciate that, and your comments in particular, very important. Our second honoree in Central Canada is Elaine Roper. And Carol, you mentioned her, so I get to talk a little bit more about her as well. Elaine's expertise lies in corporate and board governance, organizational design and development, human capital strategy planning and implementation, and executive board talent management and search. As Elaine has led the build out of a robust board practice at Odgers Bernstein Canada, and that includes director recruitment, board evaluation, governance consulting, board education, and thought leadership programs. Elaine brings over 40 years of international experience as a CHRO, consultant, and board director in the technology, not-for-profit, and private sectors. In addition to public-private partnership organizations throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. At Odgers, Elaine has partnered closely with organizations such as Women Get On Board, Women GCs of Canada, to name a few, to bring along a new cohort of exceptional female directors, both seasoned and emerging, and with diverse perspectives and life experiences. Through various programs such as the Odgers Governance Workshop Series, Odgers seeks to bring trained and well-qualified directors to a range of board opportunities. That's incredible work, Elaine. Over to you to say a few words.
I want to say, first of all, thanks for this honor. I was very, very surprised and very honored to receive this distinguished award, along with the other women, in fact, a few of whom I know, and I'm delighted to see that they've been recognized. It's been just a pleasure working with Deborah and Women Get On Board since she launched her wonderful program, which is about 5 years ago now. And also working with Women GCs of Canada and other groups to advance women and persons from a whole host of backgrounds to gain access to board opportunities and to raise the level of governance across the country. I'm lucky also to be leading and working a wonderful team of professionals at Odgers Bernstein and the board practice, where collectively we seek out not only seasoned and highly skilled board professionals, but we also seek to launch the careers of emerging board directors, and a number of a couple of the women you've met today. In so doing, we also launched a board education program that augments other programs such as the ICD and the Directors Program, Women Get On Board, and others. I can't say enough about the caliber of talented women from all professionals that I meet every day and get a chance to work with on a host of projects. It's a privilege to do the work that I do, and we do our bit to ensure that all boards have the opportunity to get the best possible leadership to guide our important organizations. Again, my sincere thanks to Deborah at Women Get On Board, to BMO, to Sheri. Thank you so much for this recognition, which is really a shared award with my Odgers colleagues. And I also want to thank my nominator and a wonderful client, Wendy Key, who's the chair of OPG, who are really committed to making a permanent difference in the quality of Canadian governance. So thanks very much to everyone.
Well, I'll congratulate Elaine and move on to our East Coast honoree today, who is Nancy Whipp. In 2019, Nancy retired as the president and CEO of CPA New Brunswick, where she was responsible for the merger of the CA, CGA, and CMA accounting bodies. Prior to this appointment, Mrs. Whipp has served as a professional consultant for many companies in New Brunswick and internationally. In addition, she provided transformational leadership to the Greater Moncton Chamber of Commerce as their CEO. Before moving to New Brunswick in 2009, she held various positions in financial management at JTI McDonald Corp, Unsworth and Associates Luxembourg, KPMG, CN, BCE, and Pirelli Cables. Mrs. Whipp got her CA designation with Ernst & Young in Montreal in 1989. And she currently sits on the board of New Brunswick Power Corporation and is the chair of their Audit and Finance Committee. She also sits on the fundraising committee for the Foundation Marchette. And furthermore, she sits on the audit committee for both the Privy Council and Global Affairs Canada. She served on the board of the Greater Moncton Romeo LeBlanc International Airport and was its chair from 2019 to 2022. So congratulations, Nancy, and I'll turn it over to you to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm thrilled and honored to have been selected as the honoree for the Eastern region. I have to say that when I first received your email advising me that I'd been nominated, I thought it was a hack, but I was very touched when I found out that it was not. I'd like to thank BMO and Women Get On Board for this honor. I also want to thank my nominator, Judith Athaide, and those who are on the call to celebrate this moment with me. You've been instrumental in my journey to become the board member I am today. Thank you, Barbara and Chuck. Merci, Rachel et Roger. And not least of all, merci, mon beau, pour ton support constant. Diversity on the board is essential in order to have different points of view. Women are part of that diversity. There has been over the years a lot of talk about having more women on boards, yet not enough has changed. However, because of organizations such as Women Get On Board, we're starting to see an improvement, but there's still a lot to do before women are an integral part of every board, private or public. I believe that this is the mandate of each and every one of us to support each other in achieving equity in a near future. Again, I'd like to thank you once again and to congratulate all the other nominees and honorees for being here to share this moment with me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nancy. And appreciate it. I'm very inspired as I got to read through and announce all of the honorees today. So very happy to congratulate everyone and be here to be part of this honor. I would like to also thank our moderator and panelists, Jenny, Kamilah, and Laura, and reconfirm that we're all here to embrace equity, continue to embrace being uncomfortable and taking action as we all make a difference in everyone's lives ahead of us. So I want us to continue that. I do want to say a special thank you to Deborah and Women Get On Board. They've continued to be an incredible partner for us, and we appreciate co-hosting this event and being able to celebrate International Women's Day with everyone. And once again, just a big congratulations to all our honorees. Thank you to everyone for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this today with us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks very much, everyone.